Hello and welcome to the Supernatural Track here at Continual. I'm your host, Gail T. Martin, and tonight we're talking about the gifts of Supernatural. What did the characters give to each other? What did the show and the fandom give to us? There's just so much to talk about. I can't wait to dive into it, but first let's let our wonderful panelists introduce themselves, starting with Melissa and Kitty.
Hi, I'm Melissa, and this is Kitty. I've been a fan since the pilot episode in 2005. Kitty has been a fan since 2020. There we go.
Okay. Danielle.
Hi, I'm Danielle Turchiano. I'm a former entertainment journalist who wrote about Supernatural from 2008 to honestly, after it ended. I also wrote about the Winchesters spinoff last year. And my dog Archie, who might make an appearance, he is brand new and has only seen a handful of episodes. So I have to get on my rewatch so that he can fall in love as Kitty has.
Carole.
I do not have a dog, sorry. I am dog free. I'm Carole Stokes, and I've been a fan of Supernatural since season 3. I started writing fanfic in 2012. And as Ellis Colton, I am an romance author.
Okay. And I'm Gail T. Martin and Morgan Bryce. As Gail, I write epic and urban fantasy. As Morgan, I write urban fantasy, male paranormal romance. But all of my worlds are ones that Sam and Dean could walk into and feel right at home. And my dogs have not been tremendous fans yet, but I'm hoping to carry that over. They'd rather chew on something, but we'll work on that. So let's talk about gifts in the show. There's some pretty famous ones, but then there's some subtle ones. So let's think about who gave what to whom and what did it end up meaning. Melissa?
Of course you start with me, and this isn't part of the homework that I did. Okay. Taking this on a really weird twist, Dean, by trading his soul for Sam, actually gifted Sam with life. And I know that that's not really what you were looking for, but it's the one thing that, like, other than the amulet, really comes to mind is that, you know, what greater gift can you give someone than trading your soul for them? And that's kind of an iconic thing to begin with anyway. So I'll start with that one.
Okay. Danielle?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great one. I think just how many times the boys are willing to sacrifice themselves for each other. I think that fits. I do want to go a little bit more literal, although I want to pick the Impala. It's a little unfair to call it a gift, I think, because Dean inherited it from John, but also Dean kind of was the one that in the past convinced John to buy it, as we learn later in the years. So like kind of he gave it as a gift to himself, kind of he just inherited it when his dad went missing. I'm not really sure, maybe I'm cheating, but I think to me, because it's such an important iconic piece from the show, but also piece from the Winchester family, what it means to all of the Winchesters and then all of their brethren of hunters, that's a really big gift. And I would argue that it's also a big gift for the other half of this conversation in terms of the fandom. And I will speak for myself and say that when my last dog was alive, I hired someone to build a little Impala for him to drive around in. So I think it's the gift that keeps on giving, you know, just not just within the show, but within the universe of the love of the show.
Okay. Carole?
I was totally going to talk about the Impala, so I totally back you on that. I mean, at some point, John handed those keys over, and so to me, that connotes he gave it. Yeah, absolutely. Yep. So I'm going to go with the obvious thing and talk about the Samulet. We see it's just such a core part of Dean from the get-go. And then when we finally find out how he got it, and that in fact, it was Bobby had given it to Sam to give to his father. But then when Sam finds out about anything, he says to Dean, I want you to have it because you tell me the truth and you take care of me, and you deserve this gift, and gives it to him. And Dean, for all that he's this rough and tumble, growing hunter kid, is just enormously touched by it and never takes it off. Of course, we then get to the episode where he does take it off, and hearts were broken everywhere. There are numerous non-canon theories in terms of Sam picked it up and saved it himself, whatever. We kind of believe that might have been the one, because then ultimately when it reappears, it is in Sam's jacket pocket. But we even get the moment in the 200th episode where Dean is like, I don't need this to know that I love my brother, but especially in those first season, it is such a touchstone for us to know that is the devotion. It really symbolizes that devotion between them. And so it's just a terribly, terribly meaningful gift. And, apart from it turning out to find God and stuff, it symbolizes the love between Sam and Dean.
Okay. Well, one thing about the Impala I don't want to miss is that in, we know how much Dean loves his car, but in Free to Be You and Me, when that scene where they're at the table and Sam says, I'm not safe to be with, I'm losing my mind, I'm going to go off for a while. Dean, of course, takes this, I'm going to go off forever, I'll never see you again. And he offers him the Impala. Do you want to take the Impala? It's the only thing Dean has. But even though his heart's broken that Sammy's going to walk away from him, what does he offer? He offers Sam the Impala. It's the only thing. Even though that is a rift between them in that episode, that's still Dean looking out for his little brother and loving him with everything he's got. So that, you're right, the Impala is just looms very large there. I'm going to mention the other gifts in A Very Supernatural Christmas. First off, Sam gives Dean the gift of a Christmas. Dean's expecting to die. He sold his soul. The hellhounds are going to come. He wants a Christmas. It's too fraught for Sam. How can I celebrate when you're going to die? And then Sam has second thoughts, and he gets a Charlie Brown Christmas tree, and he gets air fresheners and fishing bobbers from the 7-Eleven down the street, and some tacky decorations, and eggnog that is spiked way too much. But so he gives Dean the holiday. And we know that Jared really did spike the eggnog. So that spit take is real. But then Dean gives Sam skin mags and shaving cream, and Sam gives him oil for the Impala and a candy bar. And that's just such for two guys who grew up in the back seat of a car and have been to every convenience store and gas station in the lower 48. That is such a quintessential set of gifts that they wouldn't have gone to department stores. They didn't have a permanent address to order from Amazon. They would run into the quick serve and get what they had money for. And so I think that was just so authentic to who the boys were growing up. So background to you, Melissa.
Mrs. Butters gave them, and I forget the episode name, but Mrs. Butters gave them holidays. And I know that I keep picking these things that can't be wrapped. But to me, like, gifts some of my best gifts aren't necessarily things that come in a box. So that's part of it. But she gave the boys all of the holidays that they'd never had. They had that gorgeous Christmas, and then their Thanksgiving and their birthdays. And that was a real gift, because there was nothing that we saw in her brainwashing, we'll call it politely, that kind of indicated that was part of her job responsibilities. She did that as part of taking care of her boys, as that gift to them. And I thought that was really cool.
Okay. Danielle.
Yeah, I mean, I think I want to go along that line too of like what can't be wrapped, because I also didn't do this homework in terms of thinking about the gifts they gave each other. I was thinking more about the gifts the show gave the audience. And so I'm like, now I'm trying to remember who gave what to who and what episode, and my brain is a mess of things. So I think I want to point out, not dissimilar to what we were already talking about with how when Dean, who has nothing, thinks Sam is going to leave him, gives him the keys to the Impala, like the way that Dean, for all of his faults and for all the ways that he sometimes would embody John in the wrong ways, he did still take care of Sam growing up. I keep thinking about the scenes when we would flash back to their younger years and he was like making him terrible meals, but like he was trying. Like their dad walked away from this random motel in a random city and left these kids alone, and neither one of them should have been cooking probably at all. But you have Dean, who's various ages, trying to do what he could to take care of his little brother. And I mean, it's not a stable home environment at all, but I mean, we've seen it throughout the series of how Dean sacrificed so much of his childhood, and Sam was allowed to have a little bit more of a childhood because of that. I mean, he was the one that was going to maybe go to college. He was the one that was doing well in school at all. And part of that was because Dean just would skip classes and make out with girls in closets, sure. But part of that was because of the lifestyle that he was embodying from a very young age. So to me, that's a huge thing, is just like any ability to pass along a childhood or some sense of, I hate to use the word normal, but normalcy for someone so young.
Okay. Carole?
I'm going to go the more amusing route. In the episode, season 7, Time for a Wedding.
Oh, no.
Dean, who's first of all horrified to begin with that Sam is marrying Becky, and he knows there's something terribly wrong. But at the same time, he's trying to just kind of go along with things because he doesn't want to alienate Sam until he figures out what the heck is going on. And he shows up at the Las Vegas chapel, or wherever the chapel was, with a waffle iron. Now, there's nothing that would ever convince me that the Winchesters ever owned a waffle iron, ever used a waffle iron, had any idea what waffle irons were, except for the fact that it says waffle in the name of it. And yet here he shows up with this big waffle iron with a bow on it. And you can just picture Dean like walking into a department store, which, like you were just saying, they never go to, and saying, my brother's getting married. What do I get him? And they were like, well, how about a waffle iron? Everybody likes waffles. And Dean taking it and just rolling his eyes and marching off with his waffle iron. And then even when he gives it to Sam, he's like, yeah, what? He's going to toss it aside. So yes, I'll go with an amusing gift, the waffle iron.
And I bet it
like
wasn't
that.
even a department store. I bet it was a Walgreens, because they have that aisle that says as seen on TV. So you don't even have to go to a Macy's or something. You can just go to your local tricked out CVS, and they'll have, and usually around Christmas especially, they have all kinds of stuff they don't normally have. Well, I'm going to go with a pair of odd gifts, but they show a lot. Danielle mentioned Dean having to take care of Sam and feed him, and of course we know John Winchester's A+ parenting, didn't leave enough money, didn't leave enough food. So we have the flashback where little Sammy wants more of the Lucky Charms, and Dean says, well, I didn't get any yet, and there's only one serving, but Sam gives him those puppy eyes, and Dean gives him the Lucky Charms, and Sam turns around and goes, do you want the toy? Because there's a toy in the bottom of the cereal. So it's kind of like that O. Henry gift for the Magi thing. Dean gives him the cereal, but Sam gives him the toy. And so there's still a lot of love there. And then the infamous thing where Sam says, I thought I had a monster in my closet and Dad gave me a 45. And, well, that's, you don't give the kid a 45. But from John Winchester's mindset, in his twisted up thoughts, this is, all right, Sam, here's protection. You can protect yourself. And he gave him safety. Now, it's all kind of wrong, and, you know, Child Protective Services would never go for it. But in John's mental state, that's what he was giving Sam, was independence and the ability to protect yourself. Now, the fact that the recoil probably would have sent the kid across the room, broken his wrist, aside from that. But, you know, if you're deconstructing what might have been going through somebody's head, that's one of them. Melissa?
I think this was in the penny whistle episode, the Slinky and the clown doll, because come on, you know, that's just, first of all, they're hilarious. And also it's kind of that, you know, giving you something from our childhood with the Slinky, and then Dean being a snot, you know, giving Sam the clown. I think those fit.
And the look on Dean's face when he first sees that Slinky. You know, the guy's 30 years old, but this Slinky, then he wants to go buy one, or he wants to steal enough of the tickets to get one. That's little bit of the childhood he never had. And Sam knows him well enough to give it to him, which Sam liberated from Pluckies. But at that point, they had earned it. So yes, definitely. Danielle?
I'm still sticking with my like not literal gifts track, but there 2 episodes come to mind where both boys get moments of kind of, I consider them gifts of like seeing what could have been, even when you know it shouldn't stay that way. And so I'm thinking mostly of Dark Side of the Moon and mostly of What Is and What Never Should Be. Although I think you could also argue that, you know, Sam's whole storyline when he thought Dean was dead is a version of that too, because he got to live, again, a quote, normal life. And I think I'm calling it gifts to get a chance to see this, because I think you can't really know what you want sometimes until you've seen what's on the other side. Like the grass is always greener until you've tried it and then realize, no, my place is with my brother hunting. And we've seen that a lot throughout the show, but I think these 2 episodes to me told those stories a little bit more poetically. Again, I'm very aware, and don't yell at me, internet, that like the monster, especially in What Is and What Never Should Be, there's a reason that like Dean could never have stayed in that situation. But I think just even for the audience to get that glimpse of like, oh, you think you want these boys to be happy, but like, what would that do to the world? And what would that do? Like, would they even really be happy? Because what would their lives be, and who would they be? And it's a horrible thing to realize sometimes, that like they need to sacrifice for this greater good. But I think that's an important lesson to learn.
Okay.
Plus, they also have the sacrifice where, in Dean's case, he doesn't have a relationship with his brother.
Oh, in that episode? Yeah.
You know, where it's like, you know, there's something he's always both cherished and yet taken for granted.
It's like you're never going to get everything that you want. Like you think you want your mother back, or you think you want even when both of their parents are back, you know, that you think you want that, but it's not going to be what you want it to be.
Carole?
I'm going with literal gifts again, in the flashback where Sam does find out the truth, and you know, is crushed that monsters really are real, and you know, geez, they got mom, what if they got dad, and you know, goes off and cries a little bit, and Dean is devastated that he can no longer protect Sam from the truth. He's protected him for what, 6, 7, 8 years or whatever, and now the truth is out, and he can't ever give Sam that innocence and safety back. But he does go out and gets him some Christmas gifts. And at first we're like, oh, wow, how did he do that? Well, he broke into a house and stole them. But, you know, the thought that Sam would not have any gifts and was going through all of this was just more than he could bear. And so he just was driven to do it. Of course, the gifts turn out, to go horribly wrong. And we have the great thing where he's like, well, I guess, he knows you're a big old girl after all. So he still gets those big brotherly digs in. But the purity of his heart and his intention is just so sweet. That the love is all about, let me try to make up in some tiny way for this desolate holiday and this horrible revelation and just the barrenness that is their lives. Let me try for one holiday to give Sammy a little glimpse of something happy and joyful. And that is the true gift, not so much the sparkly baton and sapphire Barbie, but that's what he wanted to give his brother.
Okay. Well, I'm going to go with two separate but related odd gifts. And that is Amara's gift of Mary to Dean, what she thought he needed, and the Pearl's gift of John back to them. The Pearl didn't give them getting Michael out of Dean's head. It gave them John. Amara somehow came to the conclusion that Dean needed closure with his mom. Both gifts go very badly awry, but you get definitely some insight and some character growth and we definitely get a lot of insight into the characters, and they come to realize many things about themselves because John's back for that one day and dinner, even though their past is rewriting itself. And Sam loves kale. And well, there's Mary. But Amara meant well. So
it's the thought that counts.
It's the thought that counts. That's right. But again, they saw a lot, they learned a lot about themselves and things they didn't realize because of having her back. So those were both gifts, and maybe, not the most satisfying gift in the end, but definitely had a lot of meaning. So one more round before
I think having John as a gift coming back at least gave them more closure.
Yeah.
Especially for Sam. That Sam got to express and his love for his father, and John got to express both his love and his pride in his son, that they had so much dissension between them, and then John was gone, that I think that was a real gift, at least on that part. And then of course we got the great gift of the gag reel where they're smashing the pearl and it hits Jeffrey Dean Morgan and they all fall down on the floor laughing, and that's a moment. That was a gift moment.
That was a pearl.
That was a pearl right there.
That episode also gave us the moment John is in the kitchen with Dean and they're like drying dishes or whatever, and John says, I always wanted you to have a family, and Dean's like, I've got a family. And that was such a great insight into who Dean is now, that was a gift to the fans.
Mm-hmm. So one more round on presence in the show, and then we'll talk about the bigger world of the show, giving us things on more of a meta side. Melissa?
I'm going to pass this round because we've had such great ideas. Everything that I would have come up with has already been said.
Okay. Danielle?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'll just tack on to what you just said about Mary and John coming back, because I would also want to add Samuel Campbell to that. Having both boys spend so much time. And listen, that storyline went awry a few times. That season went awry a few times. There's a lot of dissension, but getting the time to spend with relatives that they never should have had because he had died so long ago, but in general that they never would have had because of their lifestyle. And also I think it strengthens the message of like, well, what does family mean? Family doesn't have to mean blood, because sometimes you see these people that you're related to are not always doing the best things or the things that you want to be doing. And you have more of a connection / understanding of the found family, the chosen family that you've made in the hunter community. Similar to what you were just talking about, about how like I have a family, but he would not have maybe said that in the beginning of the show.
Okay, Carol?
So this is a gift that's not between the brothers, but there is a recurring gift of the Johnny Walker Blue Label, where we first see it when Bobby advises Dean to bring it when he goes to meet Rufus for the first time, and we meet Rufus for the first time, and it helps him get in the door because Rufus wasn't going to let anybody in, but he wasn't going to turn that Johnny Walker Blue Label away. And it turns up then a few times where we know that it's kind of a running thing between Rufus and Bobby, and we get a glimpse of it in Safe House when we have the fabulous flashback juxtaposition of Bobby, Rufus, Sam, Dean in the same house. And so when we're in the flashbacks and they have a bet, and the prize is the Johnny Walker Blue Label. And so turns out to be really the genesis of that moment, that then they would give it, back and forth, or one would give one a bottle and everything. And then of course, in the very end, where Rufus has sadly been killed, and they all share a swig from a final bottle and then pour it out over his grave. So that was a kind of I almost want to say incidental, because it wasn't in the main relationship, but I think it was a really poignant gift. And it was always really well used. When we saw that, we always knew that was the camaraderie of hunters. That was the respect between them. And even though clearly at some point Rufus and Bobby had some terrible falling out, they were still able to always work together and respect each other, even as Rufus said that he would never forgive him for this one thing. It didn't preclude them still having a relationship even.
I'm going to go with the many times that food was a gift. Sam would bring back a burger for Dean, even though he didn't like burgers. Dean would bring back a salad for Sam with extra onions. Dean would bring back a salad for Sam, even though he didn't like salad. When Dean gets his soul back and isn't a demon anymore, the first thing Sam does is go out and get him burgers. Welcome back, bro. Here's a burger. That wonderful scene at Jody's where they're sitting down and having dinner, and Jody gets into the facts of life with the girls, and the boys look incredibly awkward. And Dean is just blown away by this meal. You mean you eat like this all the time? And Jody's like, it's just chicken. But to Sam and Dean, this is a big deal. And then
they leave with a stack of Tupperware.
Tupperware, yeah. Goes in the green cooler. And then there is that poor unlucky peach cobbler in the next door neighbor who just wants to give him a peach cobbler, and all things go wrong, and Bobby just never does seem to be able to sit down and eat it. But food figures so much in their relationships, and that Dean getting Sam a frou-frou coffee and making fun of him, but he still goes and gets it, even though it's going to cost twice as much as gas station coffee. Sam getting Dean the crappy kind of beer he likes, even though it's crappy. Food was often a gift between them, and it was just a way of saying, cheer up. I know you don't feel good. I love you. We'll be okay. It carried a lot of different meanings for being a necessity. So what about, the show, 15 years, 327 episodes. We're now 3 years past the end of the show, and there are still conventions and a thriving fandom and fan fiction and fan art. So what about the gifts of the fandom? to us, to the actors to the fandom. I mean, wide open. Melissa?
This is why I wanted to do this panel. I was a fan from the moment the pilot aired, but I didn't get involved in the fandom until maybe the last season, maybe the season before. And I, like you always say, Gail, I fell down the rabbit hole and kept on falling. I was going through a really, really tough time. I was severely depressed. I was going through a horrible divorce. And one of my friends said, hey, are you in Gail's Supernatural Facebook group? And because I didn't know you, but we have mutual friends. And I said, no. And he's like, oh, go check out the TFWNC Facebook group. And I did. And I found a small community of folks to interact with. I started interacting. And then I became friends with this core group of people that I speak with nearly every day. I have people who check up on me if I'm not active in our conversations, because they know that if I'm not talking and I'm not snarking, that there's something wrong. And so they check on me. We travel together for conventions. And when we talk about found family, I have my family, and they got me through some of the hardest days that I've ever experienced. I clung to the show as my security blanket, as my life raft. It wasn't a security blanket. That show was my life raft in the hardest part of my life, the show itself. And then because of the show itself and the fandom, I have a family now that takes care of me. We take care of each other.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Danielle?
Well, I can't follow that.
Sorry.
No, that's amazing. I love hearing those stories. I mean, I think if we want to talk about like the gifts of the fan for the fandom of the fandom, however we want to talk about it, one of the things I think that includes is not just the main cast. I think one of the gifts has been really all of these amazing guest stars that we've seen come through the show, some of whom we met them on Supernatural before they broke out and became, Emmy winner. Sterling K. Brown was Gordon first, and maybe people knew him from other shows, but it is a little bit of a different level, I think. And there are a lot of people like that. I mean, even Catherine Newton, like at Big Little Lies is arguably what she broke out in the industry for, but the fandom knew and followed her from this. And a lot of people who were already big names who came on the show, but we got to see them in different lights. I mean, I would argue like Loretta Devine has always been one of my favorite guest stars on Supernatural, and like she's an icon, and I knew her from a million shows, but then she came on this show, and for years, anytime I would interview the showrunners, I would point and I'd be like, when is Missouri coming back? Like, how dare you put Loretta Devine in only one episode? And finally, obviously, they brought her back. But I think it's a gift for the fans to become fans of these people through this show. I think it's a gift for a lot of these actors to be exposed to such a intense, and I say that with love, but intense fandom who will now follow you to your next show, to your next convention. I mean, I compare it a lot to Jensen's days on Days of Our Lives. When you went to those soap conventions, and I did when I was younger, I was a fan of him from Days of Our Lives, and I went to a lot of those conventions, and I watched those people travel around and follow them from whatever events, whatever show to whatever show. This fandom has that power. And I mean, to watch some of these actors get to do these conventions and know that like when they're struggling as actors, when SAG they're not getting work through SAG, they've got a life raft, as you just said. They're going to these conventions, they're feeling the love, but they're also getting paid, and they're able to survive as actors. And like that to me is huge. And that's something that I did not think I would see past Trekkies. And so then to see it with this show, and to see how creation has tried to revive is the wrong word maybe, but tried to replicate with Vampire Diaries or with other shows. It's been a fascinating ride.
Mm-hmm. Well, absolutely ditto to what Melissa said about the found family and the chat group and the Supernatural TFWNC group. Absolutely the same for me. And especially in the last few years with lockdown and pandemic and all of that, Supernatural and the fandom has been a life raft for me, just because as I said in the chapter that I wrote for Lynn Subernis's There'll Be Peace When You Are Done, I love Sam and Dean on so many levels, but they conquered a couple of my my childhood fears, my things that I grew up being afraid of, the apocalypse, and they conquered it. And so they have been the show has helped me navigate the last couple of years, just because between the show and the fandom, and people who aren't as familiar with the show are going to go, Supernatural gives you incredible hope, and it's your comfort watch. Yes, it is. I think it's incredibly an optimistic show. You might have to watch several episodes to catch on, but yeah, absolutely. And has created friendships for me that just have changed my life. So that's a definite thing. And Danielle, one of the conventions we went to during the SAG strike, a couple of the actors said, thank God for you folks, because you're paying my mortgage.
Yeah.
And how grateful they have been to be part of the show, the fandom. They know when they've got lightning in a bottle. They know this isn't normal for most shows. And it speaks so well of them that they understand that this is something special to be treasured and not taken for granted. Back to you, Carole.
Where to start?
So
I started watching Supernatural in season 3. I was already familiar with things like fandom and fan fiction via other shows and venues. So I was ready, and I just kind of dove. I was like, season 3 hiatus came, and it was long because of the writer's strike. And I thought, I bet there's fanfic. Oh, young innocent, yes. And of course, there's an immense, ocean, a planet of fanfic, and I dove in. On the less personal side, that fandom and fanfic led to me making friends all over the world. At first on LiveJournal, I was a huge LiveJournal, user. But now it's like other platforms, but friends all over the world, talk to in all kinds of different ways. A very dear friend in Germany who I've now been to a couple cons with, stuff like that. And those kinds of experiences are not common, and then to further on that I enjoyed the show, the fandom, and the fanfic so much, I started writing it. And as I said, I've been writing fanfic for 11 years. This year I took the plunge and published my first book as a male romance author. So it has opened up literal worlds to me, fields in which to explore my creativity, to be able to be in my living room, in my study, in my house, and yet converse with friends everywhere and have shared interests, and not just the show, but friendships that then have deepened and now are just friendships, not simply fan friendships. Mm-hmm. And certainly, 2 of these women here are, really important parts of that for me. On a really deeper personal level, I went through a very, very severe depression for a few years because I could not get diagnosed properly. I have bipolar type 2, which is all depression and no mania, which, there's pros and cons to both. So, so I went through like a few years of never being able to get out of this depression. And like one of you said, I think the supernatural was like a lifeline. It entertained me. Of course, the boys are real pretty. But there was that optimism because you know what? They kept fighting the monsters. And sometimes they lost, and they lost hard, but they got up and they kept fighting again. And it was that resiliency that helped me, thinking they're fighting monsters. I can keep fighting my monster. I'm not going to give up. I'm going to keep fighting this monster. And so I would watch it a lot. And then I would go to bed and I would read the books. I had, you know, a whole bunch of the tie-in books, and I worked my way through those. And when you're in so much darkness and pain, you need those bits of light and the hope that things will get better. And that's really what it gave me. And ultimately, I was properly diagnosed, and, you know, life has been good for years, to the point that I was able to start writing and sharing, you know, part of it because I had creativity that was like, please let me out. But part of it because this was part of a way for me to participate in the fandom world and to offer to fandom and to my friends what I could from me, what was my gift to them. You know, their gift to me was I got through that time. And then, you know, to the current day, that I have enormous pleasure in my friendships, in my found family. And my gift then back is, here's what I can give you. I can give you my time, my affection, my stories. And it's this great loop. And the one feeds the other, and it just goes on and on. And my husband really understands this. He likes the show. He is not nothing like, but he is so happy that I have it. And he loves that I do these panels, and he loves that I write, and he loves the friendships and everything, because he sees how viscerally important and beneficial it has been and continues to be for me, and acknowledges that does not happen, you know, in a lot of our lives, and especially as adults. Because it's really easy to be a teenage girl and like you have crushes on actors and musicians and nobody thinks anything of it. Well, when you get a little older and people are like, really? You're going to conventions? I'm like, damn straight. You know, I mean, and shenanigans, we get up to shenanigans. And, you know, and it's just wonderful. You know, when you're out there and you're dealing with, I got to pay bills, and I got to, you know, I got to replace my furnace, and I have a mortgage, and, you know, kids going to college and all this stuff, man, it's a gift to be able to say, I'm going to play. I'm going to release, you know, the fun side. I'm going to play. I'm going to have fun, because that's part of the balance of it all. You know, is that you do all of this for something, and one of those things that it's for is for you to have fun and express yourself as a person and everything. And so, long story long, when I started watching it, I didn't even know it then, but it was the nexus for a change that has permeated every part of my life, and only beneficially.
Okay. Melissa.
Carole was talking about creativity. So the fandom gave to me on the 12th day of Christmas, creativity, the creativity of all of the fan artists, whether they're digital or duct tape or watercolor pencils or whatever. I have so much art in my home because I've been able to, you know, it sounds really snobby, but I've been able to be a patron to some of these artists and afford to get digital prints. Or last year, my big splurge was one of the artists that I really love, Freckle and Dimples, who's done some great digital work for me, had some sketches.
Oops, she froze.
Oh, yeah.
Some pencil sketches that they were selling. And I was like, wait. Am I back? Yes, no?
Yep,
Kind of, you're a little choppy.
kind of.
Okay. I was able to buy a piece of art from this artist, and that was really cool. And it's also sparked, the fandom's also sparked my own creativity. My day job, I'm a technical writer. So I'm down in the weeds with making sure all the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed and the steps are right. But I don't write creatively anymore. I haven't since college. That's a whole other story. But because I'm surrounded with people who are writers and creatives, I started writing my own RPF, very short, dialogue-based fiction. And it scratched the itch for me of being creative within the fandom. And when I post something, it's almost always well received. My friends like it and I like it, and that's really all that matters. And so I really appreciate being the creativity both from other artists and being able to exercise it myself as well.
Okay. Danielle.
Yeah, I mean, along the lines of just like the creativity and the sparking of change, I always thought I was going to be a creative writer, and then I just wasn't. And the year that, not the most recent writer's strike, the 2007, 2008 writer's strike was when I kind of said, okay, what am I going to do with my life? Because I'm not selling television shows. I'm not writing feature scripts. Who am I? What am I? And that's when I started writing. I will argue less creatively because I started writing about television. And so I started writing, sometimes they'd be reviews, but more often than not, it would be, listicles, it would be interviews with people, it would be event coverage. And that's when I started writing about Supernatural. And I've told this story before, but my very first paid article was covering a Supernatural convention in 2008 here in Los Angeles. And so to me, like, it's a very biased, selfish thing to say, but like the show gave me a gift because it gave me the start of a new career. But in doing so, it kept, I feel like you've been talking about being surrounded by all of these creative people. I feel like I was able to keep my toe, even though I wasn't writing creatively, I was able to keep my toe being surrounded by all of these creative people, and still not just the people who made the show, but the fans of the show who were writing, doing all of this art. I was meeting at conventions. Some of them were doing, it's still art, but it's more like not just sketches and paintings. They were doing things with yarn and jewelry and like all kinds of things that I would never, metalwork, I would never imagine. And I feel like a lot of what that did for the community of opening up all of these different types of avenues helped me a lot, because it was a sense of, oh, I always thought it was one thing, but really it's all of these things, and all of these are valid forms of art. And also all of these are options. Now, I'm not good at any of them, but they were fun to kind of tinker around with. And, mostly I did what you did, Melissa. And I was like, I'm just going to buy things because I cannot replicate. I can't attempt to make this cool Impala necklace. I'll just buy the one that I saw that's very professionally made. And I think that that's been such a special thing, even now, as I'm kind of transitioning out of that career into a new career. I go back and I look at what the community is doing now that the show is off the air, and you're still finding ways to be inspired to do creative things, even though the show is not giving you new material. Maybe you're following the people who made the show and seeing what they are doing creatively that's helping. And people I know, fans have branched out into the Walker universe and, the Winchesters when it was on, and Gotham Knights for Misha and all these other things. But the fact that there's enough material just from this show itself to keep this piloted for years is amazing to me, and has been very helpful in my revisiting that what am I doing with my life conversation 15 years after I had that the first time, and when I thought I would never have that conversation again.
Yeah, I have to agree. I fell in love with the show halfway through season 11 and binge watched 11 seasons in 4 months for the start of season 12. And then it was on hiatus. So what was I going to do? So I started reading fan fiction. I had I had been into fan fiction years before when I was in high school and college, had gotten away from it, fell in love with fan fiction for Supernatural, discovered Slash, went down that rabbit hole. Then I came up for air and said, I wonder what the published non-fandom stuff like this looks like. I read several hundred of those, said, oh, this is just too much fun. I got to start writing this. I was already established writing epic and urban fantasy. I had never written romance. I said, I've just got to do this for my own satisfaction. And it turned out to be a whole nother side of my career. Melissa.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. I am dying. I did not realize that you weren't writing the male paranormal stuff.
Nope.
Like how because I knew you were an author, and I was familiar with some of your other stuff, and I figured because I didn't start reading male romance until fanfic, Supernatural, but I just missed that whole side. Wow, that's a really cool gift.
Opened up a huge piece that is now it again, whole bunch of new friendships with a different crew of authors, whole different side of my profession. So definitely that. And I've just got
now like 3 dozen books.
5 series. Yeah, 5 series later. But and the fan fiction and the art, such a tremendous gift. But also can't have this conversation without mentioning Jared's Always Keep Fighting, and Random Acts, and all of the things that Supernatural has done around saying it's okay to deal with mental illness. We all deal with this at some time in our lives. You're okay. We'll help you. And the fandom coming together to support each other is just such a huge gift. Well, folks, we have, as usual, blown through our time. So before we take off, let's do a quick round. Let everybody say where we can find you online. Carole?
So on Facebook, you can find me very much in the continual groups and panels, the TFWNC group. You can find me on Twitter as true_firesign10, Instagram firesign10. AO3 has all my fanfic under firesign10. And I'm also the co-host of So Get This, the Lore of Supernatural Fanfic on Spotify as Ellis Colton. I am an MM romance author. All my social media links are on card.co, and my debut novella, Prescription for Love, is now available on Amazon.
Very good. Melissa?
You can find me in the TFWNC Facebook group and on Twitter, Tin Hat Daydreams. I would say mind the profile on that.
Oh yes, mind the tags on AO3.
Danielle?
I'm on Instagram and Twitter as Danielle TBD, but I'm not very active. I'm more active on Instagram as my dog, the real Mr. Archie. So maybe he'll drive the Impala someday. We'll see.
I'm pretty easy to find at gailcmartin.com, morganbryce.com. I'm on most of the social media out there under one or both of those names. So if you spell them right, you'll find me. I do run the Supernatural TFWNC group here on Facebook, and I'm a columnist for the Winchester Family Business blog, but most of the time you can find me here on Continual. So thank you all so much for being here. This has been a great discussion, and thanks to all of you for watching and listening. There will be more Supernatural coming up soon, so we'll see you online.